I know I might look a little different from the program, so allow me to just jog people's memory. Good morning. So as Cliff and Colin introduced me, my name is Hartley, and my work is in theater and health. Theater and health. Now, typically when I tell people, I teach theater in a health science program, or I teach theater with doctors and nurses, I usually get the same reaction. A furrowed brow, followed by, how does that work? And hopefully over the next 17 minutes or so, I can showcase how those two fields intersect. Why healthcare education needs the arts, specifically drama. And there are 3 points I want to explore today in my brief time on this stage. Number 1, the fact that health science education is in desperate need of the arts, specifically theater. Number 2, that theater skills are life skills. And number 3, the question that I want to pose is, who cares about the health of the healer? So let's begin with me. I trained as an actor. And a professor of mine at the time was the one who gave me that mantra. Michael Devine told me once, theater skills are life skills. And that was a really big turning point for me in my education and my training, because I started to think about the world through that lens. How are theater skills life skills? And that led me to following a career path in applied theater. And for those of you who might be unfamiliar, applied theater is a field that uses theater or drama as a way to develop participants. Applied theater is about using theater in non-traditional theater spaces with the intention of social development or personal growth. So some examples would be theater in prisons, theater with the homeless, theater in hospitals, theater in education. Pretty much anywhere where theater typically isn't, with participants who aren't traditional theater actors. And the idea, the principle behind this, is that through theater, participants can develop themselves and or explore issues that are important to their community, explore conversations that are important to them, challenge contemporary discourse, maybe give a voice to the silent and marginalized. Now, not only am I an applied drama academic, but I'm also an applied drama product. And what I mean by that is 15 years ago, you would never have got me up on a stage like this. The very first show I auditioned for, when I was in high school, I walked into the room, looked out at the audience, and walked off. And then I came back in, and then I walked off again. And it wasn't until my buddy Owen dragged me in and said, no, you're doing this audition. And I got the role of the servant. It's my breakout role. But the one thing that I discovered by being the servant, by being a part of a theater community, was that theater has an opportunity and can build community. And that's when I fell in love with theater. That first show, The Merchant of Venice, set me on this path, that I wanted to make theater important to everybody's life. What ended up happening was, I ended up doing, like I said, grad school in applied theater, and when I was younger, I spent a lot of time in the hospital. My mom was very ill, and so I spent a lot of time in hospitals, and I started to think about when I was doing my master's degree, well, hospitals are a space that nobody wants to be in. Nobody elects to go to the hospital, unless they have to. Nobody wants to be there, maybe the exception being obstetrics. But typically, nobody really wants to be there. So I started thinking about how can we take a negative, scary space like a hospital and use theater and the arts to turn it into a more positive space. And then that got me thinking about that quote, theater skills are life skills. Theater skills are life skills. And I started thinking, okay, if theater skills are life skills, and we think about medicine as a performance, how is it performed? I'm sure many of you have had experiences with healthcare where you've had an encounter with a doctor or a nurse or another healthcare professional where you found that they were rude, they didn't listen to you, they didn't listen to your story or your narrative, they interrupted you after the first 18 or 20 seconds. And these are common stories. So I started thinking about that and going, okay, what did I need to learn to be a good actor? Well, some of the principles were just that. Communication. Presence. Being able to listen to another person. And not just listen, but fully receive their message. To be a good actor, you need to be aware of the space. I need to know how big of a stage that I have, where the lights are, where I can be seen best. My body is talking. It's saying something. And so these principles can be equally applied to healthcare training. Because if a doctor or a nurse is aware of their body in a space, it can impact how they communicate and how maybe they diagnose. And when I was doing my training, I was introduced to this theater company called Performing Medicine in London. And the director there talks about how in traditional medical education, healthcare professionals do things to other people's bodies, but very rarely do they gather an awareness of their own. But things like body language and tone and the use of space can influence a doctor-patient interaction. So that's one way theater and health intersect, the idea of development of transferable skills. The other angle is about empathy. So many of us have had experiences with doctors or nurses who just don't get us. And part of that is that they don't understand our stories. And when you're training to be an actor, one of the questions that you get asked a lot is, what is your character fighting for? What does your character want in this scene, in this play? Are they fighting for love? Are they fighting for money? Are they fighting for power? So again, how can that be applied in a healthcare setting? I propose that doctors and nurses need to ask themselves not what's wrong with this patient, but what is this patient fighting for? Because in understanding what a patient is fighting for, you have a better understanding of their experience. You're able to view the world from their perspective, from their box. If you can understand why a person is not following their medical treatment, or why they are continually struggling with their own mental health, the question is, what are they fighting for, and how can you better understand that perspective? Oftentimes, the way theater and health works is there are the standardized patient programs, where a healthcare professional will go into a room and they have an actor who's simulating a patient, and that's very valuable to the training process, because they're evaluated on their empathy and their communication skills. But I'm arguing for a transformation. Not where a healthcare professional plays themselves and an actor plays a patient, but where healthcare professionals embody the patient, where they play that patient as a way to fully understand their experiences. And one of the really neat things is that when I started to do this work, I started thinking, okay, this is all amazing work, how theater can possibly be used to train healthcare professionals. But then I thought, this is all being done in service to the patient, which is really valuable, because we want the patient to feel safe, heard, respected, to improve that clinical encounter. But then I started thinking, who cares about the health of the healthcare professional? The pressures on healthcare professionals are immense. There's this constant need to perform perfection. In medical school, you can never very openly admit that you don't know something, admit mistakes, admit that you're scared. And what that produces are doctors and nurses and other healthcare professionals that lose empathy. A doctor once told me that we take medical students once they are the most idealistic and the most compassionate, and we spend the next 4 years beating that out of them. Because over the course of the structures, of the programs, of the demands, the focus shifts from being empathetic to getting it right. But that's the beauty of theater. There is no right. There is no wrong. And when I started looking into this work, I started to discover, wait a minute, I thought I was onto something new. Theater and health, this has never been done before. I'm the first guy to ever think of this. My ego must have been that big, because when I started doing research, I discovered, wait a minute, this is not new at all. Theater has been in healthcare for a lot longer than I ever thought. But it's been done extracurricularly. To put it in context, the University of Toronto, their Faculty of Health and Medical program, has been doing a play every year. It's been doing it for over 100 years. The first show, Daffodil, was performed in 1911. These are medical students who take their elective time to write, produce, choreograph, perform a play. What? Don't they have better things to do? Western, their medical school does a show called Tachycardia, where first, second, third, and fourth years all do their own individualized show that they perform. They've been doing that since around 1955, 1956. Again, long-standing tradition. So, as a theater guy, I was like, I gotta check out these shows. What are these shows about? And what do medical students put on a show about? And what I discovered was something really interesting. If you look at it from an applied drama perspective, medical students are using these musicals as a way to explore fears and anxieties that they're currently facing within their educational structure and systems. Just to give a few examples, the fourth year of medical show at Western deals a lot with residency applications. The idea that we're going to be a doctor in a few months, and we don't know what we're doing. The idea of, am I picking the right specialization? Is medicine right for me? Similarly, in third year is when the year where students go from the classroom into the clinic, and they start putting their skills to use, and a lot of the third year shows have to deal with the idea of the inept clerk, bumbling, dropping things, being beaten up by little 4-year-olds, having the angry, mean doctor yell at you. And while these are extremely hyperbolic and exaggerated ideas, at its core, what theater is allowing these participants to do is explore community issues. They're using theater as a vehicle to project their fears and anxieties as a way to cope. So this has been going on extracurricularly, and that's important. But so now I'm asking, how can we pull that and bring that into the curriculum? How do we make theater a requirement within our medical, nursing, healthcare training programs? Because it's doing something. Anything that's been going on for 100 years has a long-standing presence. And it does it in a way that allows the medical students to mock their system and mock their culture in a safe way. Because in a lot of time, medical schools and health science programs, they don't have a space to talk about these fears and anxieties. They don't have a space to what I call play. And there's a reason for that. Because in our culture, play is a dirty word. I talk to my students all the time about how there's a certain age that you hit where you stop playing. Because it's seen as frivolous. It's seen as a waste of time. If you can't put it on your CV, lose it. It's not going to get you ahead. But I argue that play is incredibly important. And these theater productions, these theater shows prove just that. Engagement with play and with theater provides a space where participants can learn through play, where they can develop transferable skills while exploring fears and issues that they might be currently facing. And the one really neat thing about that is that, again, they can do it in a space where there are no right and wrongs. It encourages them to take risks, push themselves outside of their comfort zone, and what I tell my students is I want them to fail. And not the course, obviously, but in the space, I want them to fail, because there is such beauty in failure. And from that failure, they can start having a conversation about failure, about the experiences of failure, about the experiences of anxiety, about the experiences of fear. And those conversations are incredibly important to wellness, well-being, mental health. Because what we're seeing right now in our healthcare profession are doctors and nurses who are burnt out because they can't have this conversation, because they need to perform. I'm great. I know this work. I know what I'm doing. And the beauty is that theater strips that all away. It allows you to admit that you don't know what's going on. But it allows you to do it in a way that you're projecting onto a character. So it's not you, it's somebody else. I've often said when I do workshops and exercises, I always say, you've got what you spot. And there's one exercise that I do where I write a number on the board. I'd write 27, and I'd ask the group here to create a character for me. And a lot of the time, the fears and anxieties that are projected onto this character are conversations that the group wants to have. And I'll give an example. A few months ago, I did a workshop for OBGYN residents at Western Medical School. And the workshop was just focused on play, getting the residents to play together. And we created a character who was 25 years old. And wouldn't you know it, 25, our character was an OBGYN resident. She was engaged, but she was stressed beyond belief. Hadn't seen her friends in months, spoke to her family rarely, had no time for herself, was tired and burnt out. And when I asked the residents, does she sound familiar? I got chuckles in the room because they saw themselves in her. So, from that point, we said, okay, that's the character, that's you, now let's play. And we threw around a ball, I waddled around the room like a penguin, and we played together. And what happened in that space was there was laughter, there were smiles. People were learning, they were developing skills, but they were doing so through play. Now, in healthcare education, there is a huge transformation. Medical schools, nursing programs are starting to adopt health humanities or medical humanities programs, which is fantastic. But what's happening is they're still existing on the fringes. They're still existing as daffodils and tackies, these extracurricular productions or these elective courses. And what I argue for is that they need to be embedded within every single health science education program. Because health science education needs the arts, specifically theater, because theater skills are life skills, and because it benefits the health of the healer, which will then in turn impact patient care. So my job and your job is to keep knocking on doors, asking if the doctors and nurses can come out to play. Thank you very much.